Rear footage of Hulk Hogan's funeral procession. Hulk Hogan laid to rest in private funeral in Florida. The wrestling world mourns a legend. Today, we take you behind the scenes of never-before-seen rear footage from Hulk Hogan's private funeral procession in Florida. This emotional moment marks the final farewell to one of the most iconic figures in sports entertainment history. In this video, you'll witness the somber tribute as friends, family, and fans pay their last respects to the immortal Hulk Hogan. From the quiet streets lined with mourners to the intimate details of his private ceremony, this is a heartfelt look at the legacy he leaves behind. The sirens are quiet now. The red and yellow has been folded. The streets of Clearwater are hushed, and for a few miles this morning, Florida held its breath. The immortal is going home. Hulk Hogan, Terry Bollea, has been laid to rest in a private funeral, and the procession moving through gentle summer heat feels less like traffic and more like a living heartbeat, one slow drum at a time. If you loved him, if somewhere in the back of your closet there's a bandana you never threw away, tap the like button as a gesture of respect. Not for views. For closure. 12 days ago, the push notifications turned into a gut punch. July 24, 2025. A cardiac emergency at his Clearwater home. The kind of headline you read twice because the first time your brain refuses the words. Wrestling icon Hulk Hogan gone at 71. The confirmation came fast, official, unavoidable. WWE posted its condolences. News outlets repeated what we didn't want to hear. The era of leg drops and "what you gonna do" had run out of tomorrows. Reports later clarified what the early chaos could only hint at: a heart attack, the sudden kind that redraws a family in a single minute. The tributes poured in, because how else do you answer a silence like this? And now we are here, behind the motorcade, behind the tinted glass, behind the soundproofed grief. Rear footage captures it from the angle we rarely see: the last cars in line, brake lights glowing like vigil candles at noon. No chatter. Just the distant whisper of tires on asphalt and the muffled hum of bikes idling 2 by 2 like honor guards. A small crowd lines the curb, no chants, no signs, just bowed heads and phones lowered, as if the city agreed that some moments are meant to be witnessed, not recorded. Even the gulls circling above seem to know that the spectacle stayed in the 80s. This is for family. For friends. For the men and women he bled with, and for the fans who grew up believing that pointing a finger at the hard camera could change the outcome of a life. The procession embraces the quiet. It makes space for the private service scheduled in Clearwater, a Tuesday farewell where the pews have names we recognize and faces we don't, where wrestlers, executives, and childhood friends sit shoulder to shoulder and remember the man everyone called brother. It isn't a TV special. There are no lower thirds, no ring announcer's tone. Just scripture, stories, and a final amen before the long walk back to the Florida sun. The WWE legend's funeral is set and kept simple: a service, a procession, a burial. That's all he needs. That's all anyone does. We don't show you the front. We don't need to. The back window of grief tells you enough. A hand touches a shoulder in the limousine ahead, a sleeve brushes a cheek, a breath fogs glass and vanishes. It's the tiny human moments, glances exchanged, tissues shared, that hit harder than any highlight reel. Outside, a boy in a faded Hulkamania tee holds his father's palm tight. He wasn't alive for WrestleMania 3 or the slam heard round the world, but he knows. He can feel the grown-ups around him carrying something heavy and invisible, and he's here to help in the only way he can: by standing still, by not asking questions, by learning that even heroes need gentle exits. When the cars ease past the church grounds and toward the cemetery roads, the rear footage shows the way people unconsciously step back, giving them room, as if grief had its own right of way. Reporters keep their distance. A bike escort bows its engines to a hush. The soundscape is strange, a summer day that should be loud deciding not to be. Private doesn't mean secret. It means dignified. It means the cameras look down, and the lenses wait their turn. It means the fans who came to the sidewalk leave space for those who knew him when the lights cut and the mic died, and the only thing left in the building was a man with sore knees who asked for water and a minute to catch his breath. It means the world that made him larger than life finally lets him be life-sized, for the record that history will keep. He died on July 24th after a cardiac arrest at home. Authorities and outlets confirmed the loss. WWE posted condolences in language steady and formal because there's no corporate voice for heartbreak. Medical details: myocardial infarction would follow days later in official papers. The dates now have a shape. The words now have a weight. And the private funeral, held in Clearwater on Tuesday, August 5th, became the place where those facts softened into memories. A burial 12 days after the news. A family surrounded by a sport that was never just a sport to him. He once said he needed wrestling like oxygen. In death, wrestling returned the favor and carried him the rest of the way. There's a moment where the camera catches a reflection, our reflection, gliding across the hearse's paint, and you see what we all really are at a funeral. Not spectators, not content creators, just people in a mirror looking older than we expected. If you've ever lost someone, you recognize the choreography. The way a laugh slips out in the wrong place and nobody minds. The way grief makes you tired, then talkative, then quiet again. The way you notice small kindnesses like oxygen, doors held, water bottles handed, someone's arm offered like a railing on a staircase. Behind the procession, Clearwater pauses long enough to remember that it helped raise the man the world called a legend. He jogged these sidewalks. He told stories at these diners. He worshipped at churches not far from where the cars move now. The city is part of the eulogy. Inside the service, stories bloom and settle. A friend remembers the first road trip. A wrestler recalls a locker room speech before a big gate. An old rival calls him brother one more time, and the room exhales together. That's the thing about a private funeral. The mic belongs to the people who can say his legal name without thinking about trademarks. They talk about Terry. They remember him asking about their kids, not angles. They share the time he paid a bill without saying a word, the apology he made in a hallway no camera ever saw, the birthday call he never missed. And they talk about mistakes because that's honest. They talk about making amends because that's love. Outside those doors, the brand persists. Inside them, the man takes center stage. Not everyone could be there. That's how families work, complicated, loving, sometimes distant, sometimes stitched together by group texts and old pictures. Reports noted absence alongside inclusion, reminder that grief doesn't grade attendance. Whether seated in row 3 or standing on a beach miles away, love is still love. A funeral program can carry the names of people who chose a different way to say goodbye. There's no one correct posture for sorrow. There's only the promise that it's real. Back on the road, the motorcade slows near an intersection where a couple dozen fans have gathered, firefighters in dress blues, a retired mailman wearing a belt with a massive gold plate on it, a woman who brought a shoebox of trading cards and clutches it like a prayer book. Someone starts a hush of a chant, and it fades almost immediately, as if the crowd decided together that the time for volume was over. In its place, hands over hearts, heads lowered. An older man, gray beard, sunburned neck, salutes and holds it long after the cars pass, as if the gesture might stretch time just enough to keep the hero in sight a few moments more. Maybe that's why the rear angle hits so hard. The front of a procession is purpose. The middle is support. The rear is the last look. The way your eyes hold onto a departing figure at an airport until the crowd swallows them. The way ashore watches the boat that's already cleared the jetty. We've seen first acts and third acts all our lives. The babyface rise, the heel turn, the redemption arc. But this is the credits in silence. This is the scene after the stinger, where the theater lights come up and you realize what you just watched mattered to you more than you admitted. You tuck that feeling away for a day when you need courage or kindness, or just the swagger to get through a Monday. There will be documentaries again. There will be debates about the Mount Rushmore of wrestling and whether the sport could have gone global without the guy who made flexing into a language. There will be biographies that count the houses he drew and columns that measure the shadows of his controversies. There will be kids who discover an old match on a streaming service and ask their parents why the arena sounded like a jet engine even before the bell. But none of that is today. Today is steering wheels and tissues and sunlight. Today is family first, business nowhere on the invite. Today is the day even catchphrases bow their heads. When the final turn comes, the rear camera stutters with the movement. One last bend, one last row of trees, one last cluster of mourners clearing the path with the kind of reverence that doesn't need a script. Honor guards remove their helmets. Pallbearers step forward with a precision that looks like love. The door opens. There's a brief, private moment we do not show and will not describe. Some things aren't for us. Some things belong only to the people who earn them through a lifetime of mornings and meals and messy, ordinary days. After, the world starts itself back up. Engines rise. Shoes trade grass for pavement. Someone laughs the kind of laugh you only hear at funerals, the laugh that says, "He would have loved that story." A breeze moves the leaves. Florida resumes being Florida. The procession disperses, and the rear footage becomes a road again. You sit there a second longer, like you do in your car after a big moment, hands open on the wheel, listening to nothing. Then you put it in drive and go. The facts stay the facts. The man stays the man. He died July 24, 2025, after a cardiac event at home in Clearwater, confirmed by authorities and covered across the wrestling world. WWE announced it plainly. Days later, medical documentation pinned the cause to a heart attack, with the kind of clinical language grief we'll never learn to pronounce. On Tuesday, August 5th, family and friends gathered for a private funeral in Clearwater and laid him to rest. The rest of us gathered on sidewalks, in living rooms, and across timelines, a scattered congregation connected by a single memory. The day we watched a giant become human enough to say goodbye. If these images stirred something in you, tell us what Hulk Hogan meant to your life. The match you rewatched when you needed to feel invincible. The moment he pointed at the camera and somehow pointed at you. Drop your memory below. Share it with the people who will understand why your voice just cracked a little. The immortal was never about not dying. It was about leaving something that outlives you. Kindness, showmanship, the ridiculous courage to believe a comeback is just one more elbow drop away. Rest now, brother. The road is clear. The crowd is waiting somewhere else, and the light is good. The road doesn't end at the gates. It bends, exhales, and becomes ordinary again. Speed limits, crosswalks, a heat shimmer over asphalt that could be anywhere in Florida. But for a while, the rear footage keeps rolling, a faithful witness to the part of grief that doesn't make programs, the after. You see the cortege thinning car by car, relatives peeling away toward private kitchens and quiet living rooms where casseroles wait and the air smells like lilies and coffee. You see wrestlers who spent their lives mastering grand exits, learning how to perform the smallest, bravest act a human can do, leave the frame and walk into real life. One of them lingers by a cruiser motorcycle, helmet tucked under his arm, staring at the sky like he's waiting for one last entrance theme to hit. Another pulls a tissue from a sleeve and laughs at himself for crying. The bikes cough to life. The taillights flash. The lenses fog with a breath, then clear. What's left behind is sunlight and a low, steady hum that sounds like acceptance. The camera rides a respectful distance, and you start noticing the city's fingerprints on the moment. A diner with a handwritten, closed for private event sign, though it isn't, not really. Someone just wanted to say it out loud. A gym with the front desk draped in red and yellow carnations. A church door propped open by a battered hymn book, the kind with the corners rounded by use. Clearwater becomes a scrapbook turned to the last page. The ocean is trying on new colors in the afternoon light. The gulls renegotiate their routes. Even the palms seem to move slower, as if trees could learn the choreography of morning. A mother and son wait by the curb for traffic to break. The boy can't be more than 8, the age where legends are measurements, not metaphors. He doesn't know the dates. He knows the shape, bandana, mustache, the way a man cupped his ear to drag a roar out of thousands like a magician pulling silk from the air. He looks at his mother and doesn't ask anything because we are born understanding the grammar of funerals. Voices drop, shoulders touch, time turns wide and gentle. She squeezes his hand, and the two of them become a tiny procession all their own. One memory being passed down a generation without a word spoken. In the rear window of the last limousine, you see movement, a hand pressed to glass, a profile softened by tears, a pair of eyes closed in prayer or exhaustion. It's impossible to tell. There's no commentary, no cheerin', no need. The footage trusts you to know what it means because you've been here before, in other clothes, with other faces. You remember the parking lot after your grandfather's service, the way the radio felt too loud on the drive home, the way your hands kept finding each other without thinking. The footage refuses spectacle and lands on something braver, ordinary humanity. It isn't less. It's more. Inside the chapel earlier, the stories were the kind that never make air. A stagehand remembered the night the ring rope snapped and panic rippled like electricity. He talked about the way the veteran's arms settled around a rookie's shoulders in the dark, low voice steady. We'll get through. Breathe. A neighbor recalled hurricane season, sandbags lugged into doorways by a man who once pressed giants overhead. He laughed at himself when his voice broke, because comedy is how relief sneaks past guards in a room full of grief. An old rival mentioned an apology made in a hallway that no camera ever saw. He was stubborn, the man admitted, but he listened. That word stayed in the wood of the pews like incense. Listened. There were fragments of quoted lines that refused to be polished into speeches. Tell them I'm grateful. I wasn't perfect, but I tried. Make sure the kids know I'm proud. The pieces didn't fit a headline, and that's the point. Brands are built out of clean edges. People are not. The private service let the edges stay ragged, and somehow that made the picture clearer. No entrance pyro. No spotlight. Just a ring-shaped absence on a life that managed to be bigger than the shape that defined it. The rear footage turns down a side street and finds the small rituals that sit on either side of a funeral like bookends. At a florist's back door, a worker dumps water from a plastic bucket, petals clinging to the rim like confetti too tired to keep up the act. In the church lot, someone stacks folded chairs with a tenderness that borders on reverence, as if even the furniture deserved a respectful send-off. A cop leans against her cruiser, writing something in a tiny notebook, then stops, closes it, and just stares at the horizon for a beat longer than a beat. The camera doesn't intrude. It lets the moment decide what to keep and what to release. There's a truth about processions you don't understand until you watch from the back. The last car sees more goodbyes than all the rest. Folks who arrived late, people whose bus ran behind, the coworker who couldn't leave the shift until the manager relieved him. These are the late arrivals who still needed to stand still and see the symbol pass. They lift their hands. They bow their heads. Some whisper thanks. Some say nothing. The rear footage catches all of it, and you realize that closure doesn't keep a schedule. It shows up when it can. It counts, even if no one tallies it. Grief has corridors, and the procession has led us through most of them now. Shock, reverence, story, silence, laughter, silence again. There's one more. It's the one where you tell the truth to yourself in plain language. He mattered to you. Not in a vague, poster-on-a-wall way, but in the unglamorous calculus of a hard week. He gave you a reason to believe a comeback wasn't a lie. He taught you that theater can be holy when it's done with your whole chest. He made your father, who never cried at anything, yell himself hoarse in the living room one Saturday night and then hug you like a teammate. That isn't trivia. That's inheritance. And a funeral is where you sign for it. Outside the cemetery walls, the town resumes being a town. A car wash spritzes a pickup. A mail carrier swings a satchel off one shoulder and stretches his back. Two teenagers practice a handshake so elaborate it could start a match on its own. But if you tilt your head, you can still hear the tail end of something sacred: boots on grass, the chimed clink of a belt plate being placed where only family can see, the hush of the last prayer pulled tight like a knot. We commend him to the sea of memory, the minister says, or maybe you just imagine he does, because the words fit the day. We commend him to light. There will be reckonings tomorrow. There always are with legends. People will write think pieces weighing the weighty, praising the praiseworthy, arguing about the parts that hurt and the parts that healed. That's not a betrayal of grief, it's a continuation. Telling the whole truth is part of loving someone in public. The rear footage teaches you how to hold both, the myth that sold out stadiums and the man who asked for help without using the word. You can honor the show and honor the soul. You can raise a banner and bow your head. You can say, brother, without irony and mean it. For now, though, the lens lingers on little kindnesses. A wrestler with hands like shovels takes a tiny step to make room for an elderly aunt to pass. The gesture is so practiced it's almost invisible, which is the highest compliment you can pay kindness. A florist's assistant kneels to rescue a fallen ribbon before the wind can claim it. Someone gathers half-drunk water bottles into a tidy pyramid because order is a prayer you can do with your hands. The sun shifts again, and the shadows do their afternoon waltz across the lot, and the bikes that led the line become people again, helmets off, helmets under arms, mouths moving to say thank you to volunteers whose names won't be printed anywhere. The camera, which has been respectful enough to feel like a person, makes one last turn and shows you the thing you didn't know you needed. The empty road, clean and bright, the kind that invites, not intimidates. That's the other secret of the rear angle. It gives you not only the last look but the first step. You sit with that for a moment. The immortal was never about ignoring time. He was about outlasting doubt. He turned entrances into spells and exits into lessons. He made a lot of kids believe that pointing at the horizon with your whole heart could bend the day in your favor. Today, the spell is different. Today, the lesson is simpler. Love big. Apologize when you must. Enter loud. Exit gentle. Somewhere, a jukebox decides to be sentimental. A chorus you know by muscle memory sneaks out a cracked open door. Someone chuckles and says he'd hate the mush, then sings along anyway, because grief rearranges your preferences without asking. A young wrestler knees taped, dreams still loud, leans against a pillar and closes his eyes, letting the chorus pour courage into places he didn't know were empty. You can almost hear the pep talk he gives himself, the one 100 veterans gave him in locker rooms that smelled like sweat and electricity. Keep going. Be kind. Work the crowd and then work the mirror. When you mess up, fix it. When you win, share it. When you lose, learn. When you leave, leave light behind. The footage stutters. The battery's almost done. It catches one last accidental reflection. You again, a witness with a pulse, hair a mess from a day that started early and ended late. You look older than you did this morning, which is fair. Grief ages us in useful ways. It puts lines where wisdom should live. It puts patience where certainty used to be. You take a breath so deep your ribs argue with it. You let it out slowly. The road waits. We could end here, with the neat poetry of a long shot. But the truth is Messier and Kinder. Funerals finish nothing. They mark a boundary and give us permission to cross it. They don't erase the ache. They teach it a new language. Tampa will still host shows. New music will still hit. The next generation will still improvise their own miracles under lights. And on some night years from now, a kid will be taught the old art by a coach who keeps a photo in his wallet, not to idolize a man but to remember a promise. That wrestling, when it is good and brave and generous, is a way to keep people alive inside each other. So take your moment. Sit in your parked car with the engine off and your hands open on your knees. Let the silence do its good work. Then tell somebody a story. Tell them about the first time you believed a silhouette could fix a day. Tell them about watching with your dad or your daughter or the friend who needed a win. Tell them how stupid and beautiful it is to cry about a person you never met, and how that is maybe the least stupid, most beautiful thing in the world, because it means the bridge worked, the one from a ring to a living room to a life. Then go make something with that feeling. A phone call. A promise. A piece. If this rear footage gave you a way to say goodbye, leave a memory below. Not a statistic. A moment. The night you shouted yourself hoarse and laughed at how much you cared. The time a stranger in a replica belt high-fived you in a grocery store because he recognized your shirt and your heart. The morning you needed bravery and found it by humming a theme under your breath before a job interview. Share it. Someone out there needs your little map out of a hard afternoon. That's how legacy actually works. Not granite. Not plaques. People, rest easy, brother. The convoy has cleared the lane. The shore has watched the ship pass the jetty. The ring is dark for now, and that's okay. The echoes know their lines. The light down the road is steady. And if you listen, really listen, you can hear it soft, not stadium loud, but strong enough to carry the sound of a crowd you can't see, rising to its feet one more time. The day after a funeral always feels like a rumor. It moves through rooms and streets and inboxes, sounding almost true until reality catches up with it. The rear footage, replayed quietly, becomes less about the motorcade and more about the soft mechanics of a community stitching itself back together. You start to notice the workers who arrived before dawn to set cones and direct traffic, and then slipped out of frame the minute the last car passed. A groundskeeper walks the edge of the curb with a trash grabber, fishing wilted petals from the gutter with the gentleness of someone handling photographs. A volunteer in a safety vest leans on a folding table and stares at a handprint left in condensation on a water cooler, a smudged signature by someone who needed cold in a hot moment. The faceless service of grief is everywhere if you look for it. It has no merch table. It doesn't ask for an autograph. It just shows up, does the work, and leaves before the applause. In living rooms across Florida and far beyond, the television glow keeps pulling people back, news segments looping tribute packages, home videos uploaded by fans who were there, playlists constructed from themes and commentary tracks, podcasts promising respect with just enough argument to keep the heart awake. The rear angle follows them into those rooms, not as a voyeur, but as a mirror. None of this is glamorous. It's dishes in a sink that will get washed slowly. It's the half-finished cereal no one touches. It's the coffee that keeps being made not because anyone needs caffeine, but because warmth in the hand is a kind of medicine. On couches and kitchen chairs, people talk about the first time a silhouette on a screen felt like permission to be larger than your small life for 3 minutes at a time. There's a phenomenon that happens after loss that no chart tracks, the sudden, reckless generosity of the grieving. You start giving things away. Time, help, the last slice, the right-of-way at an intersection, the best seat by a window. The wrestlers who spent their adult years guarding reputation like a title belt let down the rope and let the next generation step in. A veteran calls a rookie he once barked at and says, simply, "I'm proud of you." A promoter waives a merch fee and slips the percentage into a charity fund under a name that doesn't need to trend. A fan messages another fan they argued with on a forum months ago and apologizes for a post that broke a boundary. "I was tired," they type. "I should have been kinder." Grief's strange arithmetic turns subtraction into addition in ways that make no sense until they make all the sense. That night, the sky above Clearwater looks like a backdrop. It's almost rude how beautiful it is, like the world didn't get the memo. A pier hums with soft conversations. A street musician hauls out an old guitar and plays the same 4 chords he always plays, but slower, with a patience that makes the notes stand up straight. He doesn't change genres to chase the theme. He stays himself and lets the mood find him. That's its own kind of tribute. A woman in scrubs stops at the end of her shift and listens for 1 verse, then 2, then 3. She closes her eyes. Her shoulders lower. Then she goes home. Not everything needs a speech. The footage that lingered at the back of the procession begins to do something subtle. It teaches you how to be an audience for silence. It edits in longer breaths between cuts. It refuses to underline meaning with captions. It lets a shot of brake lights at dusk hold for 2 beats longer than your modern attention span thinks it can bear. In those extra beats, something else moves in, memories, of course, but also the strange high-definition clarity of ordinary life. A napkin folded meticulously by a man with shaking hands. A granddaughter tracing the edge of a program with the tip of a finger. A friend counting chairs and losing track and not caring. When the world is loud, details hide. When the world bows, they step forward like volunteers. People text the same words to each other all day. I can't believe it. Belief, though, is a slow animal. It needs to be coaxed, not shoved. It appears in the strangest places. In a garage, a man pulls down a busted suitcase from a shelf and finds an old event poster rolled inside. The corners want to curl back into memory. He smooths them with his palm and grins at a typo no one noticed then and no one will fix now. In a storage unit, a woman opens a box of VHS tapes with names scribbled on labels and writes herself a note to digitize them soon, not because clicks matter, but because time does. In a thrift store, a teenager finds a sun-faded tee that smells like dust and 1,000 washed-out Saturdays. He buys it for $2. He doesn't know why yet. He will. There's a kitchen, always a kitchen, where the center of gravity returns. You can tell because the laughter here sounds like a confession. Guilty at first, then honest, then necessary. A cousin tells a story about a Thanksgiving where the turkey never defrosted and somehow it turned into the most perfect meal anyone remembered because the whole family chose joy as the side dish. A neighbor mentions the day a camera crew blocked the street and he cursed under his breath until he realized whose van it was and decided to be annoyed at fame and proud of it at the same time, which is the most Florida reaction there is. Someone brings out a photo album with plastic sleeves and the kind of glue that never learned about acid-free paper. The pages crackle like a fireplace. A thumb holds a moment still as a breath, a man mid-laugh with cake on his nose, a handshake that looks like a peace treaty, a church picnic where everyone is squinting into the sunlight like hope is hiding in the glare. On the internet, the fight you expected fizzles, then reforms into something better. One side posts a highlight clip, the other posts an apology. Both admit the way a heel can teach a child about storytelling and a face can teach a grown-up about grace. People post pictures of their parents in house show crowds, pointing at a ring that looks like a smaller, stranger cousin of the memory they carry. A grandmother types in all caps because that's how she learned the machine, and no one corrects her because why would you? Somewhere else, a man who always thought he was too cool for this kind of thing writes a paragraph and deletes it and writes it again and hits send, because he realizes cool is a code word for afraid and he isn't afraid today. The rear footage plays in a small window on his screen while he writes. He doesn't look at it. He just knows it's there. He breathes easier because of that. There are apologies at funerals that never get spoken aloud. The footage catches the posture of them anyway. The way two people who haven't made eye contact in a decade share a bench without moving the air. The way a conversation begins with weather, moves through traffic, and finally slides into the one sentence that needed saying, I miss you. No score swells. No extras appear. Just the quiet friction of pride loosening its grip on two lives that forgot how to turn toward each other. Later, they'll exchange numbers again, this time under names that fit now. Later, they'll send a text about a memory and laugh in the same key. Later is how grief pays interest. Somewhere in the afterglow, a young wrestler sits on a hotel bed with his gear bag open like an altar. He lays out knee pads, tapes his wrists, and talks to himself because that's how you rehearse courage. He isn't imitating a moveset, he's copying a vow. Work hard. Respect the crowd. Protect your opponent. Go home. He scrolls his phone to the rear footage and pauses on a frame that shows nothing but taillights and evening. He doesn't know why that helps. It just does. He finds his boots and smiles at the scuffs. He whispers, thank you, to a room that answers with air conditioning and the promise of a new card taped to a locker in the morning. On a dock, a couple in their 60s carry two folding chairs and a small radio. They sit and face the water because grief is a tide, and you might as well watch it do what it does. The radio catches a station playing an old anthem that once made arenas feel like rocket launches. They let it play. They don't do the hand motions. They don't need to. A pelican glides by like it owns the hour. A fisherman curses quietly and then laughs at himself, which is the way all good curses end. The couple hold hands. Not the grip of panic. The grip of agreement. We will keep going. We will keep the good. We will leave the rest to history, which is merciless and merciful in alternating seasons. Back in the house the family returned to, there's a problem with the sink. Of course there is. Grief invites plumbing issues the way summer invites mosquitoes. A neighbor shows up with a wrench and a joke and half a plan. He fixes nothing important and everything that matters. Call me tomorrow if it leaks, he says, which is code for, you don't have to be alone. In the hallway, a child draws a picture and tapes it to a door at shoulder height for a grown-up. The proportions are ridiculous in all the right ways: biceps like clouds, a grin that refuses sadness, a cape that never existed but does now because crayons can see the invisible. The paper curls at the corner. Someone presses it back down. It holds Dada Pastor later, sits at a desk and writes a thank you note to the funeral home staff. He lists names he had to double-check, because getting them right is part of the liturgy too. He writes, "You made room for love," and underlines it once. He doesn't sign with a title. He signs with a first name because grief flattens hierarchies in the most beautiful ways. In an office nearby, a city administrator drafts a memo about traffic patterns during processions and calls for more training, because dignity benefits from planning. A rookie officer reads it and thinks about the old man at the corner who saluted until the last car passed and imagines herself with that kind of steadiness someday. Night slides into the small hours, and the rear footage finally stops looping in living rooms because phones die and eyes close. In that thin slice of time when the day forgets what it was and the next hasn't introduced itself, a quiet pact is made across 1,000 households. We'll remember the entrance themes and the exits. We'll remember the strong man and the soft-spoken neighbor. We'll argue in good faith about legacies, because honesty honors better than silence. We'll teach kids to cheer without malice and boo without cruelty, and we'll tell them the world is a show sometimes and also not a show at all, and the art is knowing which is which and when to be kind in both. Mourning comes with less fanfare. Someone feeds a dog, which is holy work. Someone texts a check-in and gets a heart reaction that does the job words can't. Someone replays a clip at half volume while making eggs and lets tears fall into a pan and doesn't apologize to the empty room. The procession has given way to routine, and routine is where love does its long, unglamorous labor. Plants get watered. Bills get paid. Memories get filed somewhere between hurts and helps, which is a folder every heart understands. You might ask what the rear footage finally gives the world that the front never could. Perspective, of course. But also permission. It says you don't have to lead to belong. You can follow and matter. You can be the last car and still carry the essential thing. In national myths, we worship the firsts. In real life, we survive because of the lasts, the last look, the last hug, the last text that arrives right before you decide to quit and tells you not to. The last car teaches patience. It teaches humility. It teaches the understated bravery of finishing what you started with grace. There's a phone call between two old colleagues, the kind that ends 3 different times, then continues 3 different times because neither wants to hang up and return to a room where grief is loudly rearranging the furniture. You remember the way he'd point, one says. Like he could pull the shout out of you. The other laughs, and the laugh sounds like clapping in a small venue, fast and warm. He pointed, he says, and now it's our turn. It's corny and it's true, and the best things often are both. They promise to get coffee. They will. Even if it takes months, they will. You get in your car at last, because re-entry is inevitable and the day's errands won't run themselves. The road is as unremarkable as all honest roads are, but you find yourself driving like a person who understands that blinkers are love letters and merges are collaborations. The radio gives you weather and traffic and a song that lodges behind your sternum like a warning flare of joy. You let someone in. Someone lets you in. A small convoy of kindness forms and dissolves without announcement. The world has a million of these processions every day, brief, unnoticed, essential. You join one without thinking. You wave a thank you that the other driver sees. You mean it.at the end of the block. A kid on a bike wobbles, recovers, and shoots forward with the kind of determination that makes you believe in plot lines again. He lifts one hand off the bar for a second to salute a passing truck driver who honks twice, quick and soft, like encouragement. For a heartbeat, the street turns into an arena. Not the bombast. The belonging. You feel it in your ribs. You nod to no one in particular. The day agrees to proceed. We've spent a long time with the back of a procession, and it has one more lesson to give. When the last car goes by, the crowd doesn't evaporate, it transforms. People look at each other. They find their place again in the ordinary geometry of sidewalks and schedules. They smile the small smiles that say, "We did this together." Then they do the next thing. Open a shop. Answer an email. Pick up a kid. Rest. The work of memory is in these motions. The tribute is in the try. The legacy is the line of people who show up for each other on days when the world has no marquee. If this long, quiet angle gave you a way to breathe today, hold on to it. Use it when the headlines come for your certainty. Use it when your body remembers its limits. Use it when you need to turn down the volume on a room that thinks only cheers and boos count. Whisper instead. Carry the back end with care. Leave space for the latecomer who still needs to see the symbol pass. And when it's your time, when the moment calls you to the front, or to the middle, or to the last car, answer with the steadiness you learned here. Point to the horizon for someone else. Pull the shout out of them. Then, when the music fades, exit gentle. Share your memory below if you haven't yet. Not the numbers. Not the merch. The moment. The way a stranger's performance rescued a real day in your real life. The way an exit reminded you that love is a job with no retirement and no last bell. The way a legend became human in a way that made you want to be better at the human parts of your own story. Write it down. Give it away. That's how the rear footage ends, not with a black screen, but with a hand extended behind the last car, palm open, ready to be held by whoever is arriving now. The week folds itself up carefully, like a costume packed after closing night. Clear water goes to work. Lids on trash cans settle. Boats leave thin signatures across the bay. Somewhere a warehouse door grumbles open and a ring, a real one, regulation posts and ropes that bruise, waits for people who will tape their wrists and learn how to fall. Nothing about the rear footage feels needed anymore, but you keep it close the way you keep a program from a show you can't stop replaying in your head. The camera reminds you what endings look like when they're done right, measured, generous, alive with small mercies. In one of those nameless gyms where ceiling fans wage brave, but losing battles against Florida heat, an old coach unlocks early. He sweeps. He doesn't need to. The floor is clean. He sweeps anyway because repetition is a kind of prayer and grief needs rituals your hands can do. When the first students arrive, they're uncharacteristically quiet. No peacocking, no jokes about angles they dream of stealing. They roll their necks. They stretch. They set out water without clatter. The coach claps once and it echoes too loud in the empty metal building. "Okay," he says, voice notched lower than usual. "Basics." And the morning becomes a catechism of respect. How to lock up without hurting. How to listen with your forearms. How to leave your opponent better than you found them. On the far wall, a sun-faded poster refuses to stay taped. It curls at the edge and keeps trying to look toward the door, as if waiting for one more entrance. Later, the coach tells a story. Not a scandal. A kindness. It's about a night when the gate was light and the morale lighter, and a star with no reason to stay stayed anyway, signing every program and pointing at every kid like the gesture could physically lift the timeline. "I learned there's a difference between showmanship and generosity," he says, and the room hums with that good kind of silence where truth lands without needing to be amplified. A trainee leans back against the middle rope and wipes his eyes with the back of his wrist. He's embarrassed at first. Then he isn't. If the day has taught anything, it's that strength and softness are not enemies. They are tag partners who win more often than not when they work together, elsewhere. A small museum in someone's spare room opens for a handful of visitors who hear about it the way all good things are shared, by text, by whisper, by a friend of a friend. Shelves of figures pose in permanent flex. A yellowing ticket stub survives under glass like a pressed leaf. There's a Polaroid that caught a grin in bad light and somehow becomes the most valuable thing in the room. The tour is free. The owner doesn't do it for money. He does it for the sentences he watches form in strangers' mouths. "I was there, and my dad took me, and that was the night everything was all right for 2 hours." He nods, careful as a curator, and wonders whether to keep growing the collection or let it stay this size, human, unpretentious, full of fingerprints. The rear angle keeps teaching. It tells you heroes are a group project. The crowd builds them. The crew catches them. The rivals sharpen them. The family forgives them. Legends don't happen alone, and neither do farewells. When you watch the taillights fade, you are looking at the work of 1,000 small anonymous decisions: to show up, to be patient, to hold a space, to set a cone in the right place, to put a hand on a shoulder at the exact moment the weight shifts and the knees wobble. Online, the noise threatens to return. You can feel the algorithms licking their chops, ready to convert ache into engagement. And yes, conversations you can't avoid begin, because complicated lives leave complicated footprints. The remarkable thing, the rare thing, is how many people choose nuance over attack. "He meant this to me," someone writes, and also, "Here's what we should learn." Another answers, "Thank you." Both can be true. It reads like heresy in a culture addicted to one-word verdicts. It feels like relief. You bookmark threads just to remind yourself that generosity can be as viral as outrage when someone brave goes first. The house where the family gathers grows quiet in the afternoon. Grief is exhausting in the way that a long match is exhausting: intervals of sprint and stall, adrenaline and gravity. Someone naps in a chair they never nap in. Someone takes a walk and comes back with nothing to report except the shape of the clouds and the fact that the pharmacy line moved fast, which somehow counts as a miracle. The dog, patron saint of unasked for comfort, lays his head on a knee and refuses to move until the breathing in the room deepens. You could film this too, but you won't, because the rear footage has already given you enough to imagine it accurately: the ordinary holiness of people taking care of each other where ratings don't reach. When the sun leans toward the gulf and turns the edges of everything to coins, a pier fills with couples and loners and families who never planned to be here together but are. No chance, no signs, just bodies drawn to a horizon that's been doing grief counseling since the first ship sailed beyond the line where water swallows sight. A teen in a replica belt stands next to a veteran in a hat that knows heat waves and parades and hospital corridors. They don't know each other. They nod anyway. Somewhere close, a group of kids practice promos into the wind, voices breaking, language too big for their mouths yet, and the older folks pretend not to listen because it's good for the young to think they are only performing for the sky. Everybody starts somewhere. Everybody learns to hear when the room turns. Inside a quiet church hall, folding tables become a buffet of casseroles, as if carbs could retroactively protect a heart. People eat standing up, talking in the shorthand that grief invents for people who have a lot to say and only a little breath with which to say it. Someone mentions a hospital visit a decade ago when a giant hand dwarfed theirs, but squeezed with the patience of someone changing a light bulb. Someone else remembers a phone call after a loss that didn't make news, 3 minutes of presence that did the work hours of speeches never could. No one records. Everyone remembers. The stories slide into each other like chain links. If you're the praying kind, this is where prayers shift from why to help. If you're not, this is where your language turns to hope anyway, in the form of practical wishes: that people sleep tonight, that apologies find their mark, that the next show is safe and good and weird in the right ways, that the new kid who just got called up hears the hum and understands he's not stepping into a vacuum, but into a river that's been running longer than any one career. The rear footage, played again in a quiet living room, gives you one more image to store where the valuable things go. It's not the motorcade. It's after. The street is empty. The camera is still. There's a piece of ribbon stuck in a bit of curb grass, red with a hint of gold when it catches light. The frame holds. You expect a hand to enter and pick it up. No hand arrives. The ribbon lifts when a breeze remembers it. Then it settles. Then it lifts again. That's all. A small, stubborn color where solemnity just passed. A reminder that grief doesn't bleach the world. It teaches it to glow quieter. In the weeks to come, the industry will do what it does when it's at its best: carry on without pretending nothing happened. A bell will toll 10 times in a building far from here, and a crowd will answer the silence with applause that feels more like a promise than a celebration. A match will end with a finish that leaves a little room for grace. Someone who loves a microphone will choose one less sentence than they could have said. The hard camera will be in its usual place. The announce table will do its job. The ring will sing its old, familiar hymn: impact and lift, cadence and hush. Somewhere in the run sheet, A segment will be unremarkable and necessary. Two people doing honest work for a crowd that needs a reason to breathe together. You might think the rear footage's job is over by then. It isn't. It becomes something else, a memory that sneaks into your posture. You let someone merge. You hold a door a second longer. You send a message first. You choose a gentler word. You remember that legends don't need you to speak for them nearly as much as the person beside you might need you to listen. You catch yourself pointing, not at a camera, not at an opponent, but at a task you can actually do today to make a little more room for somebody else to stand up straight. In a wooden box on a dresser. A program from the private service rests beside a rosary and a hotel key card from a city that treated you well once. A grandson asks a grandmother why people keep stopping by with food, and she says the line she learned from her grandmother without ever thinking she'd use it, because love insists. The boy nods, as if that explained gravity. He draws another picture, this one smaller, details better, colors careful. He signs it with block letters and holds it up to the lamp, proud of the way light makes the cheap paper look like stained glass for half a second. Night drifts in on quiet feet. You don't need the footage anymore, but you don't delete it. You keep it the way sailors keep maps after a safe crossing, not to frame them but to remember which currents to respect next time the weather turns. You stand at a window and listen to a neighborhood doing its 1,000 private acts of survival, a dishwasher rattling courage into plates, a baby testing lungs, a neighbor's laughter punching a hole in the dark, an air conditioner grinding out an act of mercy. It's all music if you get the tempo right, and if you're still wondering what to do with your hands now that the flags are folded and the pews are stacked and the bikes have gone back to being bikes, here is the oldest answer and the newest one. Tell a true story about what this meant to you, and pair it with a kind act that costs you something. The story keeps the flame. The act carries the heat. That's how the rear footage becomes frontline work in a world that needs less spectacle and more steadiness. If this long goodbye gave you language you didn't have yesterday, use it. If it reminded you of a person you should call them. If it made you want to be braver in small, boring ways, be that. And if you have a memory you haven't shared yet, a match watched in a living room that felt like church, a hallway handshake that made you show up differently the next day, a laugh that saved an afternoon, leave it below. Not because algorithms reward it. Because community does. That's where legends truly rest, not on pedestals, but in the way we carry each other when the arena goes dark and the road is only lit by tail lights. We're learning, at last, to follow with care. Rest easy, brother. We've got the back end from here. There's a version of Aftermath that lives backstage, away from cameras and microphones. It looks like a production truck parked in the same spot out of habit, doors open, cables coiled, somebody's coffee cooling on the bumper. It sounds like the building taking a breath, HVAC humming, catwalks ticking as metal changes temperature, the ring creaking because wood remembers weight. In this version, the rear angle exists as muscle memory. Crew moves slower, kinder. No one says why. They don't need to. They change out a turnbuckle pad and tighten a bolt that didn't ask for tightening, because care is a language you speak with your hands when your throat doesn't trust words. ATA community center that smells like floor wax and childhood. A youth program meets under a banner someone printed on a home computer with too much ink. It's crooked. No one cares. A coach who wrestled in boots long retired teaches Bray falls on blue mats, palms slapping the ground like applause. The kids count in unison and giggle when they mess up and try again without shame. The lesson underneath is older than belts and pyro, how to land and get back up. A girl with a braid down her spine nails it on the third try and sits cross-legged, beaming, the way people do when skill finally shakes hands with courage. The coach nods. He doesn't say the name, but everyone in the room knows who taught him to teach like this, loud when necessary, gentle when possible. Clearwater quietly rearranges itself around memory. A bar along the water puts a framed photo near the register, nothing flashy, just a candid smile, eyes crinkled, someone leaning in to hear a story. The bartender tapes a handwritten note beneath it, tell yours. The prompt works on people who didn't come in to talk. They do anyway. The stories are small and perfect, a chance meeting at a gas station, a handshake at a charity event, a wave from a convertible on a street that never expected a parade. One man confesses he once heckled too hard at a signing and got called brother anyway. He laughs at himself and wipes his eyes and buys a round he can barely afford for strangers who nod like family. Charity organizers make phone calls no one sees. A scholarship gets a new name. A youth clinic builds a new weight room with fewer mirrors and more chalk. A recovery program expands because grief and generosity are secret cousins. A woman who never liked wrestling mails a check because she loved someone who did. For the kids, she writes in the memo line, because attaching money to hope makes the ink feel braver in your hand. Somewhere, a bean counter frowns at a spreadsheet that refuses to stay balanced. Somewhere else, a volunteer smiles at a list of names that does. In a nursing home that runs on schedules and mercy, an activities coordinator wheels a TV into a common room and puts on a highlight package she's already watched 3 times to make sure it doesn't move too fast for the eyes in this place. The residents synchronize their attention like a choir tuning. A man who hasn't spoken much this week raises a fist and lowers it again, smiling like a child caught dancing. A woman whispers, "My boys used to wake me up on Saturdays for this," and the sentence carries the weight of a mortgage paid and lunches packed and a life that did its best. When the package ends, nobody claps. They don't need to. The quiet lands like a blanket pulled up to a chin. The rear footage keeps returning to you at odd hours, like a friend who knows when to call. In line at a pharmacy. At a red light while the sun shoulders down through a line of trees. In an elevator where strangers breath the same small air and pretend they aren't. It whispers the same lesson each time. Endings are communal. We like to imagine a hero walking into the sunset alone. It makes for better posters. But the better truth, is that the last mile is crowded with helpers. Police escorts and florists and ushers and the cousin who remembers the spare tissues, the neighbor with the toolbox, the fan who went quiet at the curb and held their breath out of respect. The back of the line is built by a village. Somewhere, a documentary team starts drafting a treatment. They're good at this, honest and unafraid, but not today. Today they just list names and dates and questions on a whiteboard and then stare out a window longer than they planned. A producer underlines a phrase, "Tell the whole truth." Not to fix anything. To honor it. There's a way to carry contradictions without letting them cancel each other out. There's a way to talk about glory and hurt in the same paragraph and have both ring true. The rear angle makes that feel possible, because it doesn't require crescendo, it requires presence. A memorial show happens in a building that's seen better lights and worse crowds. The bell tolls 10 times, and for once nobody counts out loud. The applause after isn't loud, exactly. It's deep. Like a heartbeat amplified. A young wrestler walks the aisle later that night and stops halfway to point, not as cosplay but as gratitude. The crowd answers with a cheer that sounds like permission. In the back, a veteran watching the monitor smiles and says to nobody, "Yep." The match that follows is simple, clean, generous. Nobody tries to steal the night. They try to serve it. When the finisher lands, it's less a punctuation mark than a nod to an old language everybody still speaks, even if accents have changed. Back on the Gulf, a 10K charity run wins along a road you know now by the shape of its shoulders. People in red and yellow jog in packs that look like families, because they are. A woman who swore she'd never run anything longer than a grocery errand crosses the line with her friends and cries into a paper cup of water. A boy, cheeks flushed and proud, holds up a medal the size of a cookie and says, "Look." To a father who pretends to be winded so the boy can feel stronger. The rear footage would love this. Movement with purpose, a line stretching forward this time instead of away. Nobody in a hurry to be first. Everybody delighted to be together. In living rooms, the argument about legacy reopens. But it's softer around the edges, the way beaches round glass. People try out sentences they wouldn't have risked last week. He hurt me here. He healed me there. I learned from both. There's a kind of courage in refusing to flatten a person into either halo or